instead of searching for a silver bullet to what's like the perfect way to close a sale, I think it's important to.
All right, Caitlin, thank you so much for being on the show. Really looking forward to talking with you. You are the Director of Education of Quantum, and a lot to discuss. But how are you, first of all?
Hi, Dan. I'm doing fantastic. And it's been a busy day at Quantum as always, which is so fun. And I'm just really looking forward to chatting. It's been a little while since we connected in California. And the last time I saw you, we were sharing a beautiful meal over dinner with friends in the insurance industry and eating some amazing Korean food. So that was fun.
That was so fun. Yeah, shout out to Daniel and his wife Christina. That was amazing meal, and we were just talking about it before we started. But yeah, I learned. I was in the right room that night because I learned so much from you guys. And I've made some changes in my businesses. So I'll remember that night for a night where it made a lot of differences, not just for the food, but for learning about lead management and things like that. So why don't we go over how you really, or what your current role is right now with Quantum, and what kind of your daily day activities are.
Absolutely. So I'm the director of education at Quantum, and that was a new department that Quantum launched shortly after they began as a company because we wanted to create systems and processes that you can scale and that would apply to our Quantum team as well as our agency force. And that's been such a fun project. I don't have an education background. I never dreamed of being a professor, a teacher, anything in that realm of education. Before this, I was an agency owner in the captive world, in the independent world. And it's just been so exciting. I've learned so much. But the way Quantum is set up is that we are an insurtech agency activator. And that means we have a few different locations. So we have our main hubs in Fredericksburg, Virginia, as well as our main hub where I'm located. I'm here in the North Dallas area. If any of you listening or nearby my area would love to get coffee sometime. But we also have our amazing agency force of entrepreneur-owned quantum agencies across the country in about 50 different locations. And so the challenge that I was given was, hey, we need to be able to train and educate and develop the new talent that comes on board at Quantum so that they're able to grow. How do we shorten the learning curve? How do we make sure they know how to be successful in their roles? And so that involved having really great sales training for our sales team that comes on board at Quantum, just to give you a high level overview in a nutshell. But we also provide the customer service for the agency force. And so we have our client care team here as well that we invest a lot of training and education into to make sure they're being coached on a regular basis. And the other side of that is, how do we set agencies up for success and make sure that they know the best practices and have systems and processes in their agency that help them when they launch a quantum agency and as they continue to grow, bring on new team members and scale. So what that has looked like is partnering with the other members of our education team to create a program that's unique to Quantum. It's something we developed in-house as opposed to purchasing content elsewhere, to really share what practices we've used over time to be able to create a buying experience for clients, deliver great service, coach and develop team members, and scale our processes to be able to succeed and grow so that we have a plug and play solution for someone when they come on board. We can't make insurance easy, but we believe we can take a lot of the mystery out of it. And so it's my team's job to create courses and content that occurs in our online platform as well as in the classroom. And I'd be happy to chat about that more. But what we found is really successful is not just leaning on video. Video has its place, but really bringing it to life in a in-person environment now that it's a little bit safer for everybody to be in the same spot at once. And that's just been a really neat project to work on. And it's something that's always evolving and growing.
Yeah, wow. 50 agents now, huh? That's
Yes.
exciting.
So we're in most of the states from the East Coast to the Midwest to the West Coast. I think there's only 2 states left that we're not doing business in just yet. So um, it's pretty exciting, and different time zones for the client care team to manage as well. So all sorts of moving parts and pieces to that, but we're excited to be a national agency.
That's really awesome. Yeah, but everybody wants to get better, and training and education is how, one of the best resources you could provide to your team. So that's awesome. And then you also, which I was really also interested in too, is help out the customer service side too, of how to get them to trained and have the resources for them to be able to be good at customer service.
Yes, and it's so important. Obviously, clients are the heartbeat of quantum. And so there's this need for us to be able to deliver like a really great experience for clients when they interact with quantum, and also to deliver on our follow up on our promise to our agents, making sure they're having a good experience with quantum as well. So a lot of training and coaching goes into that, and so we have created a process for our conversations that we call serving with purpose, and it just walks our team members through how to take a good call and turn it into a great call.
Hmm.
So that's where a
Yeah,
lot of our training and coaching
I love that.
focuses. And so that way, and it's obviously important to make sure they have the technical skills that they need to have, and how to process an endorsement, and what questions to ask, and how to have quality transactions. But what does the conversation sound like when we're doing that? And so one of the things that we built out that's really helped a lot is taking time to design what we wanted serving with purpose to sound and feel like. So when we first answer the phone and a client calls in, everything from a uniform greeting to starting by confirming the need, and that active listening that goes into the client feeling heard, and right out of the gates creating peace of mind. That's when your client gets to take a deep breath, feeling like they reached the right person to handle
Hmm.
their request. And what I found is that taking time to slow down and make sure those 2 steps are happening sets up the rest of the phone call for success. And so, so what we've learned is that it's one thing to have a call where a client calls in and you say, "Thank you for calling Quantum. This is Katelyn. How may I help you?" For example, and then the client's going to tell you what need they have. Like, "Hey, I got a bill in the mail. It doesn't make sense. Why are you guys charging me this extra $25?" And what can happen is, one thing that I found from listening to calls is that it's pretty common for team members to gravitate towards wanting to say something like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm pulling your policy up right now. Can I confirm your last name? And what's your policy number?" And so it's really tempting to jump to trying to pull up the policy, confirming you're speaking with the right person. And those are all great things, but we've missed confirming need and creating peace of mind in that moment. And
Hmm.
so being able to know when to slow down and create that relationship is so important to the rest of the call. Because what if, instead of just, "Oh, well, sure, I'd be what's your policy number? What's your last name? I'm pulling it up right now." What if instead of that, we replaced it with, "Oh, you got a bill in the mail for $25? Oh, well, Julie, I'm Katelyn. I'm so glad we connected today. I'm going to be pulling your policy up right now so that by the end of our call, you'll know exactly what's going on with your policy and what to expect." How does that sound? That moment of confirming the need and creating peace of mind, describe to the client what's going to happen by the end of the call. It's not just saying, "I'm happy to help you." It's giving them that chance to take a deep breath, knowing that they're in the right hands, they've reached the right person, and that I'm going to be able to help them today. And so that's where we start. And then there's a few other steps to that conversation. But as you can tell, I get a little bit excited about it. I like to geek out about those fun things, because sometimes it's something that small that can turn around the rest of the phone call.
Yeah, no, that was great. I want to record that piece of clip and send it to my team. We should be doing that every time.
That's fun stuff.
So yeah, so to be able to train sales agents, independent agency owners, and the service side, you must be a master at both sides. So that didn't happen overnight. So tell us, Kaylin, a little bit about how you even got started in the insurance business, where you even grew up, and how this all started.
Oh, absolutely. So I've been in insurance for about, oh, well, almost 11 years now, Dan, because it'll be 11 years April 1st. But I have those agency roots that'll always be such a big part of my story and who I am and my, approach and how we handle things because no matter how big an agency gets or how much they scale or how much they start writing new business at levels they never expected for their agency, they don't have to lose the heart and soul of their agency and that special value that agents do provide to clients. And so I I started as an agency owner in the captive world as an Allstate agent
Hmm.
and did that for several years. It was a hometown agency in a cute town, Geneva, Illinois, like boutique town, wonderful place to open an agency. And just learned so many great foundational skills. It was really a good thing that I was able to have that first entrepreneurship experience and hire a team and go through the pain of like trying to figure out where you get leads. And now that you have a lead, how are you going to close it? And now I can close the lead, but how do I train this person to close their leads? And so we went through all the growing pains of how do we have a presence in this local community when there's so many other insurance agents around, and where on earth are we going to get the funds for leads when we were just a small agency starting out? And it was hard to recruit at the time. We had a smallish team for several years before the team started to really grow. And there were times when it was really hard. I worked all the time. This was before I had children. And so I would work pretty much all day, every day, 6 days a week for a couple of years to learn what I needed to learn to make sure the agency was successful. And that's certainly not easy. There were networking events I went to where I walked away with no referral leads
Mhm.
afterwards. And there were employees I hired that I thought were going to be the next rock star that didn't work out. And there were, months we didn't hit our sales goals, but all in all, learned a lot from that experience. We were super successful. Our agency was Inner Circle Elite every year consecutively that I was an agent. The last year that I was owned that agency, we were the number one agency in the Midwest, best in region.
Wow.
And what's interesting is I found myself in this situation where I loved my team. I loved what I'd learned. It had been exciting, but there came a point for me where I wanted to be able to kind of like redefine what success would look like, and as opposed to comparing it to the carrier's goals, and ultimately decided to go independent when we moved to Texas. And that was a fun adventure as well, opening an independent agency and working out carrier relationships and launching that team from scratch as well. So I haven't purchased a book of business. So far, my agencies have been scratch, and I specialize in startup business and how to launch and get through that startup phase.
Wow. Yeah. Maybe because we do have a lot of captive agencies out there, that story in
Yeah.
itself, that part of your career, is very interesting and relatable. What was it, because you talked about all the difficulties that we go through to get to where you were at the end there. What were some of the game changers you would say that turned things around from, having to work every day, every single minute?
So I'd say there's like maybe two things that come to mind at the moment. One was that for me, community networking and local referrals with mortgage brokers weren't working to the level that I wanted it wasn't bringing me the volume of leads that I wanted. And I'm a pretty extroverted person. I like to think I'm pretty sociable. So I
Yeah.
tried going to all the chamber events. I tried meeting all the, mortgage brokers and having referral programs. And I think those things are so important. But for me, I was new to the state at the time. I didn't know a ton of people. I didn't have like the people that I'd gone to college with there,
Hmm.
people that were like going to my kids' school at the time. I didn't have children. So when that stopped working, I had to figure out how to make internet leads work. And at that early stage, honestly, for the first several years that I was an agency owner, I actively sold on the sales floor with the sales team. And so honestly, I think putting that headset on and figuring out how to sell internet leads with a high close ratio has been, I don't think I would be where I am today if I hadn't figured that out, because I had to be able to increase the volume that was coming in and had to be able to close it so that acquisition cost per sale wasn't too high. So I figured out how to sell personal lines by having that headset on and by having to do the not exactly cold calls because it's leads that have come in, but outbound calls to that internet lead request and overcoming objections when they say, oh, I already got a quote, or I'm not interested, I'm not looking anymore. And then having to close the business when you know they received other competitive quotes. And those experiences have continued to build over time and become a big part of our selling with purpose process today. And so happy to talk about that more. But I think it's so important to have multiple channels of marketing that you have coming in. If you're great at referrals, awesome. If you're great at mortgage leads, awesome. But being able to work in digital sources as well is just going to expand your ability to be able to reach outside the like that local community and bring on a higher volume for your team. Momentum is so important for sales teams. And so I'm just a big proponent of driving activity into your agency through a variety of methods. So, and that's just because it's what worked for me. And I don't think I would have seen the success I did without that. And it's tough. Like, I mean, I certainly understand why agents get stuck on that and why it can be hard to figure out how to sell through that lead source. But we had the right retention processes in place as well. So that captive agency had a 91% auto home retention over a 5-year period of time, with internet leads being the main lead source. And so I'm just a big believer that it can happen, but you have to have a sales process. And you have to have a great retention process as well. The second thing that I think was pivotal for me was I had mentioned that like it was so hard to like find the right team members in that area. I don't feel like we were the highest paying like career choice that they had in that town. And so honestly, what made the biggest difference for me was that transitioning to delegating some of the recruiting. And now Quantum has our own recruiting department. We help recruit for the agencies, but long before we had a recruiting department, it started by delegating some of the recruiting activities to one of my team members. And I had a team member in the office that was like a champion of the agency. She loved us. She believed in us. She really like lived out our agency like value proposition in every conversation. And she was just such a big believer of all the great things we were doing in the community and wasn't shy about it. And being able to trust her to take over some of the recruiting conversations freed me up to be able to focus on the areas that I needed to be able to give my attention to. And I just think recruiting is time consuming. It takes forever. You have to be recruiting year round, always recruiting. And when you put up ads, the quality that you get might not be great. You might get a bad response, or you might have a ton of people applied, and maybe you're just trying to get them on the phone for a phone interview and you're playing phone tag, or you get them on the phone for a phone interview and they have questions about what it would take to get licensed in insurance. And I found that those were steps that I could delegate to this trusted team member. And what that turned into was freeing me up to be able to be the person where she didn't just screen the candidate, but she sold them on the agency. They were hearing about it from a real team member that worked inside the agency. So they were already bought in and wanted to speak with me by the time they got to me for a real interview, or in-person interview, I should say, like the formal meeting. And I just found that to be even more successful than when I was doing the phone interviews myself.
Yeah, maybe there's something to say about a potential coworker talking to them instead of their potential employer. But yeah, that's really interesting. I never really thought about that because I was always like, yeah, well, I'll have people do my customer service and do the sales so I could recruit. But that's also something we could kind of delegate a little bit to free up more time, because some of the questions are repetitive. So, and then I know you guys ended up being, you mentioned a little bit, but you guys had some really big numbers at the end there as far as like staff size and premium, right?
Yes. So in the captive world, we were able to scale pretty large. My husband had a captive agency as well, and when we moved down to Texas, I was a part of that agency. Um, my agency that I owned in Illinois stayed within, say, 10 team members. But the Texas agency that we launched was quite large, and a big part of that was hiring a recruiter
Really?
and being able to train the team on sales processes that worked really well. Because when you can always afford a great salesperson or a great closer, right? So the
Mhm.
question is, how do we develop them to get them to that point, so that from the time they come on board to the time that they're generating revenue for the agency isn't too long, that it's not affordable.
So what was that like to have for you to have an agency and your husband to have an agency? Friendly
Um,
competition or?
I thought it was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Um, we have different
Same carrier?
strengths and skills, and so it's neat to be able to play off each other's strengths,
Hmm.
and um, so I think it was a great experience.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. But I think there's a lot of people maybe that are, trying to enter leads, maybe not having success with that. Can we go a little bit deeper with the sales process, or what is it that kind of, you know, because a lot of people have tried and haven't succeeded with it. Um, what are some of the tips or advice you would say to, agents that are still trying to, make but purchasing leads make sense for them?
Yeah, absolutely. When I listen to calls, so there's some common trends that I see. So this may or may not be occurring in your agency to the listeners, but being able to shadow the calls, like figure out what the interactions sound like. And it's really interesting how sometimes what feels intuitive to our team members doesn't always align with how you might want your agency represented on the phone. So when an internet lead comes in, I would start by listening to how they're greeting the lead, how the prospect, the potential client that came
Hmm.
in, and start listening for what kind of questions they're asking and how are they introducing your agency. Because what I found is that it's totally possible for a team member to pick up the phone and talk to a client. They could even close a sale without introducing the client to the agency.
Hmm.
and so that's a common mistake that you want to listen for. Is did they say, great, well, I'm so glad we connected today. The reason I ask is because I'm here with this agency, and one of the ways we can help you is this. Quantum is an independent agency now, so our talk path for that might sound a little bit different than for a captive agency. But um, figuring out how you want them to represent your agency's value proposition and giving them some talk paths around that is huge. So one of the exercises that we do is writing down, okay, like what are 10 things that we know we can deliver on today besides shopping for the cheapest rate. So
Hmm.
we know that we're going to review their options, and the price will be a factor that we look at, but we don't know where that's going to fall. We can't be 100% confident that we'll be able to deliver a cheaper rate than what they're spending. We haven't even looked at their coverages yet. But what are we 100% confident that we can deliver on today for a client? And there's tons of stuff that we can be 100% confident that we can deliver today for them. And when we start giving the team that verbiage around what value we really provide in addition to just shopping rate, or trying to find some savings, it really empowers them to better be able to meet the need of that client. So when the client says, oh, well, my renewal is coming up, and I got a bill in the mail, Then it becomes asking the open-ended questions to figure out what's going on. Oh, did they send you a bill? Did your agent give you a call? Did they explain to you what's going on with your policy? Oh, they didn't. Well, here at our agency, here at the Platinum Elite Agency, we don't want you to have any surprises with your policy. So one of the things that we do is reach out to you before your renewal to go over any changes and make sure that you've looked at all your options to make sure that everything stays a great fit for you. So tell you what, one of the things that we're going to do today is make sure that all your coverages are caught up to speed, that you're not missing any discounts that you qualify for, and you know exactly what to expect on your policies. With that in mind, what kind of cars do you drive, Dan? And so if we start the call with asking questions about what's going on with their situation to make sure that we found the need and we understand what's going on, and then we've introduced how the agency is going to be able to help them today, and tagging onto that, like what they can expect by the end of the call or the end of the conversation. Now we've set the stage for a quality conversation to happen. And then you're assumptive and you just say, well, with that in mind, do you own or rent at Murphy Drive? Or with that in mind, Dan, what kind of cars do you drive? Perfect. I'm pulling it up right now. Let's keep talking about that. And so I say that because instead of searching for a silver bullet to what's like the perfect way to close a sale, I think it's important to rewind that and reverse engineer, like what's the silver bullet, like perfect way to open up the conversation, and finding the need from the client, asking those open-ended questions, meeting that need, and then assumptively letting them know what to expect out of the conversation and how we're going to take care of them today sets up the rest of that conversation for success. And it sets you up to start creating a buying experience instead of just quizzing the client or asking them questions or just fact finding. And it's hard as an agent not to get stuck in the trap of fact finding because there are so many questions that we have to ask, but creating a sales process for your agency really takes the mystery out of it for your team members, where they should put those value creating moments in there so that they're driving the conversation and they're creating a buying experience.
Wow. Yeah, that's so awesome, Caitlin. I 100% agree with that. There's so many things you said there that's gonna work. Where sometimes we just don't want to take a guess at what they want to hear. We have to understand what their situation is, and to get them to open up. When my agents say, "Hey, I want to close more," it's like, "Hey, you got to open up more up and get them to open." And really understand what benefit they want to hear and use that angle to at the end of the conversation too. But to use it in the beginning, I think that's really important too because yeah, that makes me kind of question our sales process too because I hear some of us doing it really well and some of us are going straight to the questions and just the questions that you have to ask and it just becomes a price conversation without any value or anything that we're able to say about the agency. So. Yeah, that was really well said. The
Well, and I feel you, Dan, because I have empathy for the team members that feel like they have all these questions they needed to ask, and they're trying to get the information in the system. It's actually not easy to be listening to the client while you're moving from, like, say, your lead management system to, if you're an independent, your rater, the captive quoting system, and it's a lot to try to like hear what the client's saying, actively listen, know what what you're going to say next while you're trying to type everything in, and make sure you have the right driver's license number and all this stuff. So it's what I'd say is that if someone's falling into that trap of like asking too many questions up front, it's still not too late for them to do it if they'll put on the brakes and circle back around to it. And so that can be a good place to start, is having a checklist of a few things that need to happen in the introduction of the call.
Mhm.
And just start by coaching on the introduction. Like, what are the things that we want to have happen in the first 5 minutes of the call? And even if they get it out of order a little bit while they're learning it, we can kind of give them that permission when they're in training mode. That's like, okay, maybe you caught yourself and you're like, oh, I just asked birthday and driver's license and year, make, model of a car. And if they ride share with Uber, but I forgot to like ask them if their agent gave them a call and explain why their rate went up. It's not too late to still pause and slow down and go back to creating value. And so what we do is we turn that into like we call it like a call calibration form, where you can score what happened at that part of the call, or the team member can listen to their calls and score themselves. And it enables you to then, create checkpoints that show like, okay, now you're ready to learn the next stage.
Yeah, yeah. Getting that in the intro is so important because yeah, it really sets the tone for the whole conversation. And some people, a lot of us, make judgments early on if they would really like this person. Before, sometimes if you do a great job at that, it's almost like the price doesn't even matter as much if you do such a great job at that part. So that's a great value that you provided to everybody here. So thank you for that. Um, what about, the retention side of it? Any tips that you could share to help your retention increase?
Absolutely. Oh gosh. So retention is so important because it's it's such an indicator of how your clients feel about the agency, how sticky they are. It's such a huge source of revenue for the agency, and keeping a current client is easier than bringing on a new one. So that one's huge. There's a lot that I could say about retention, and I would start with an article that I wrote called, oh gosh, I don't even remember what the article's called now. Have them at hello. So it goes back to the beginning of that conversation, because if we didn't take time to find need at the beginning of the conversation and then intentionally meet that need throughout the conversation, the client's not going to be as sticky as someone where we had a transactional conversation and things just, the stars aligned, and they bought the policy. It's totally possible to sell a client just because the rate was cheaper. They don't have any idea who the agency is or any idea what we have to offer. And at the same time, it's totally possible to lose a deal when you are cheaper because they didn't know who your agency was, or what difference you make in their experience. So I can't under stress how important it is to have a really strong sales conversation process if you want to have great retention in the agency.
Hmm.
And so one of the first things that we look at is the 90-day retention. Like, are any policies falling off in the first 90 days? Like maybe they didn't activate their telematics and they got a bill, or maybe
Missing
their down payment
documents.
didn't go through, or, the document. So knowing what the 90-day retention is and the getting visibility around that full client life cycle is huge. So I just didn't want to skim over that, because when a client leaves, it's so often because they just didn't have like a sticky connection with the agency. They need to know who you are, why you're there, how you help them, and what difference that makes for their insurance experience as you guide them through managing the risks in their lives. From a coaching standpoint and education, we've broken that down into our serving with purpose process that I highlighted for you that helps us create a client for life in those routine everyday conversations, like adding a car. But we also have a scorecard that we use, and the scorecard helps us to quantify how we're doing, like how happy are the clients with the agency. And we don't want to just be efficient robots that are quality and compliant. We want to have happy clients, and so we grade for client experience. We look at client responsiveness. How responsive is this team member to the incoming calls they're responsible for, the outgoing calls they're responsible for, the suspenses in the system they're responsible for. How hard is it? How hard does a client have to work to do business with my agency?
Hmm.
And so looking at client responsiveness and how long they have to be on hold, how often calls are abandoned, things like that can all go into the scorecard depending on what that particular team member or supervisor is responsible for. And policy improvement. So here's something I found that was kind of a light bulb moment for me. What I found from coaching team members on saving policy. So let's talk about that situation where a client calls in and they've already found something else. And they're like, hey, I'm calling to cancel my policy. Oh yeah, I found this other agent and they're saving me like $800 a year. We work to really save that client, review the coverages, make sure we're not creating a lapse by not knowing the effective date, pulling up a policy, reviewing it, trying to save that business. But that's a really difficult conversation for our retention teams, right? That's not an easy one. It's probably the one that like makes them the most anxious and feel
Yeah.
the least confident and the most stressed about their job. But I've noticed, I have this theory that there's a dotted line between how strong the agency is at policy improvement on routine calls and how confident the retention team will be when it comes to client saves. When it comes time to get out of your comfort zone and try to change a client's mind who's already decided they're leaving the agency, that's a really difficult position to be in. It's a difficult conversation to turn around and to actually win that business back. And if they see that policy improvement on regular routine calls is part of your agency DNA, and part of their everyday conversation when they're adding that car is making sure that they have loan lease gap coverage, or making sure they're not missing rental car reimbursement, or making sure that even if the client doesn't need collision, that they have comprehensive. If that's part of your agency DNA, it makes it so much easier for them mentally to believe, like, I can't let this client leave our agency. Look what a great job we're doing, people. Look at the professional advice they get from their agency. And that kind of happens on a subconscious level of how bought in they are to believing like this is not an apples to apples situation. If they leave our agency, they're at risk of the next agent not taking care of them the way we do here. So we found that the
Wow.
bigger focus that we put on policy improvement. So like, did we increase the liability limits? Did we add the rental car coverage? Did we add the water backup coverage? The stronger we are at that, the more bought in they are mentally to a retention client save call.
Wow. Yeah, that totally makes sense. In sales, you got to believe your product, but same thing when it comes to customer service and retention. If you believe the product and if you believe the agency and the company, then that transfer emotion they're gonna feel that. And, even if it's 1 out of 10 clients you're able to save, that's still, one extra sale that you got for the business. So, really powerful stuff. I want to get into customer service, but do you have to go?
So I'm actually going to have to head down the road, pick the kiddos up from school here in a minute.
Oh
I
man.
don't want to be the last mom picking them up at daycare while they're like
Well,
waiting in the lobby. So
well, yeah. I don't
I
want to be
love
the.
talking about this stuff, Dan. Thanks so much. This was super fun. And yeah, I love talking about customer service. And our customer service team members have such a complex job, don't they? And
Mhm.
I just want them to feel confident about it and to have that like just genuine happiness knowing that they gave professional advice to somebody who really needed it today, and they did a good job. So that's kind of my driving motivator and what makes me so excited to keep fine tuning these things along the way.
Well, I'll let you go only if you promise to do a part two.
Deal.
I don't want to be the reason that you're
Oh.
late for your kiddos. So yeah, thank you so much, Katlyn, for being on the show today. But yeah, there's gonna be so much more that we want to learn from you. So um, you know, great things that you guys are doing there. I mean, Justin is one of the smartest persons just from the short conversation I had in dinner in the insurance business, I feel like. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your strategies, and I'm looking forward to the next time we have a chance to have a conversation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. This was super fun. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
All right, you too. Thank you,
Thanks,
Caitlin.
Dan.
Okay, bye.